So today we'll be adding to our previous class of using the sum function. So today we'll be talking majorly on absolute and relative referencing in Excel. So I've drafted a few tables down which we can use in carrying out today's explanation, so it will take less time. So I prepared a little table to save time that we are going to be using. So naturally we are used to our function using the sum and our arithmetic operators that we use in our argument of our functions, which is the addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication used by. So normally we're familiar with this. Say I use D3 and F3. We are used to that. We get a value, and we are used to copying a particular function down, right? We'll copy a particular function down with this. It reuses that formula down. So let me just edit this to what we need, since I don't want to cause a complication. So this would be division, while this would be multiplication. Okay, let's confirm that's correct. Addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. Okay, that is correct. So now, when we're talking about referencing, what we naturally do when we copy a formula down is actually referencing. Let me do that. This one is along the column. Remember here, this particular function, the sum function here, or so to say, the formula is actually referencing the column of D and the column of F. Specifically in this particular cell, it's referencing the column of D3 and F3 to carry out its argument. In this time, an addition argument. While this, because we copy it down, it reuses that function. And I did a little editing, so I can have the exact thing I want. It's using that function, but still referencing the column of D and the column of F. Now, that is what we call a relative reference, because it is referencing along the same column in this particular case. But then I prepare something down here so I can show you a referencing along a particular row. Let's say equals to sum. This time we are using C9, and we are using C11. So I'm using a comma, C11. Enter. So in this particular case, if I push my formula forward, if I copy my formula forward with copy button, it references the same line of row. In this particular case, the row of 9 and the row of 11. So it does that along those three arguments, the row of 9 and the row of 11. Now that makes it an actual relative reference, so which means relative reference altogether. That makes it an actual relative reference. So let me do that here too with just only an addition in this particular case. Remember, we're taking D3, right, and we're taking F3. So let's use the same two so we don't have complications. So relative reference, this along the column, this along the row. That's for relative reference. So now, when we're talking about absolute reference, what does it mean? Now remember, when we're using a relative reference, we are copying or using an actual value. In this particular case, we are using a formula. Now that formula is referencing a set of cells, and when we push that formula down, it references a set of cells along, in this case, along the row. If I say row of D, a row of F, referencing that line of column. While this one references the line of row of 9, a row of 11. Now, what about absolute? Absolute in this case is when we are actually making reference to one particular column or one particular row. Now, if I say I have a formula here and I want to make an absolute reference. Now, naturally, we know we just make reference to some cells when we're carrying out an argument inside our function formula. Let's just pick that same thing. Let's say D3, comma, F3, right? So I'll not hit my enter yet so you can see what I'm doing very clearly. Now, I have D3 and I have F3, right? Now, remember, this is along a column. I'll be picking the cell F2. Now, remember, my formula will be going down along a column, which means along a column. Now, I don't want the formula to go off this F3, which means no matter what happens, even if the D is going absolute reference, I want this F to be, even if the D is being relative along this particular column, I want the F to remain absolute on that particular row. It's on the column, I want it to remain absolute on that particular row. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say, now, we know we have F, which stands for the column, while 3, which stands for the row. I don't want my formula to go out of that row. So what I'm going to do is, you have a $sign on your keyboard, which is a shift and number 4. Now let me hit enter. Now, what I'm telling the formula to do is, no matter what happens, stay on row F3. So stay on the 3 row. Retain the F column, stay on the 3 row. So when I push this down here, if you notice I have the same response or the same answer. Let me put it out, the same answer. Why are we doing this? Remember, we created an absolute reference on the row 3. Let's confirm. Now, we have our row 3 here. So 45 plus 2, which is 47. Now let me hit enter. Now, the reference of row 3 retains, which means now the formula is going relative to this, which is 45, and because I make the absolute reference into row 3, it is going 45 plus 2. Now, despite the fact that my copy button has reused the function, it continues to retain the cell of F3. So that makes this row F3 absolute. Remember, I did not make the column absolute because my formula is going down along a column. In this case, I may not need to do that. So which means I only reference to make the row 3 absolute. So even if my formula is going to naturally be going relative reference, my F3 will remain absolute, which means my row 3 will remain absolute. Let's try that. Let's just confirm the rest. So you see this one is absolute on row 3 and the last one is absolute on row 3. Now that is absolute reference. Now let's try that on let's try that here. So let's say, let me copy this. Let's make use of this to save my time of typing it. I believe it should work, and I paste. Let's see what happens. I have to change it. So we're changing it back to C9 now. and C11 for C11. So let's keep it that way. So in this particular case, now when I copy this function forward, I will want it to retain the row of 9. So by now you should be able to understand how this works. So I want it to retain the row of 9. Remember, what I'm retaining is not the column. It is going to move along the row, which means no matter what happens, this C9 should not change to C10, but C11 can change to C12. So I'm targeting my column. So no matter what happens, do not go off the column of C9. So you should know what I'm going to add here, the $sign. C9. No matter what happens, retain the column of C. Do not move out of the column of C. Let's hit the enter. Let's find out if it's going to work. So if I push this one forward, 1, 2. So let's find out. So we have 68, we have C9, right? C9 added to C11. Let's hit our tab button. So if you notice, we have C9 again added to D11. Let's hit our tab button. You notice again we have C9 added to E11. So no matter what happens, our column retains C9. Now that makes this an absolute reference. Now here we reference just one particular row, which is F3, which is the row 3, and here we reference the C9. Here we reference the F3. Both of them are absolute reference. In this particular case, we are referencing one of either the column or the row. But then, what if we make an absolute reference to both? I also prepared something here for you that you can use. You can pause the video and just create this on your own. So now, this is what we're going to do. Now here, we want to make an absolute reference here. So let's say equals to SUN. Now normally we can say I want to add, okay, I had 1 here before, I'll change it later. I want to change it back to 1. Okay, good, that does that. So let's say equals to sum, sorry about that, SUN C17 plus D18. Enter. So now the idea is I have 4 plus 1. So this is relative, right? We are expecting to have a relative response here, which means it will move along a column if I pull it down. So which means if I put it down, it does 4 plus 1, 5 plus 2, 6 plus 3, right? So that is 4 plus 1, 5 plus 2, 6 plus 3. Then if I also pull it forward along that row, it does the same thing. It does 4 plus 1, 5 plus 2, 6 plus 3. Right? Let's find out. We have 4 plus 1, we have 5 plus 2, we have 6 plus 3. Now that makes it relative reference. Now, what about absolute reference? Now, in this particular case, I want to be strict on just 1. Now, in this particular case, let me make a pick. Let's make a pick. If I follow that same pattern and I say C17, comma, D18, right? Now, this particular place, I don't want to go out of my, sorry, hold on, okay, good. So no matter what happens, I want this formula to retain the cell C17. So I'm pushing my absolute reference a little more higher, retain C17 no matter what happens. Retain C17 no matter what happens. So now, this is what is going to happen in this formula. So no matter what happens, when I move down, this is going to do 5 plus 1. It's going to do 7 plus 1. It's going to do 9 plus 1, no matter what happens, because my referencing is retaining to stay on the column C and stay on the row 17. So let's see if that works. Let's move this down. Bam. Let's find out if that works. So click. So that is 4 plus 1. Let's go enter. That is 5 plus 1. Let's go enter. That is 6 plus 1. Now, because I made sure it doesn't go off my row, my cell C17, remember, I make sure the column and the row reference is absolute. I make sure both of them is absolute. So if I go forward, the same thing retains. That particular cell remains absolute. So this is C17 is being referenced here. If I go tab, that is going to show if it's going to work. So it continues to retain C17. If I go tab, it continues to retain C17. So that makes this place absolute, while this one remains absolute. So that is how absolute referencing works. On many occasions, we can move out of a particular column, out of a particular row, or we can make sure our referencing retains a particular column or along a particular row. Or on many occasions like this one, we can make sure our referencing stays on just one particular cell. So that shows us how relative and absolute referencing work. So watch this video over and over again. Pause. If you have a question, you can send your questions in the comment section below. So thank you for watching. Do have a nice day.